So hello both, how are you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Good,
very good, thanks.
I think first of all, congratulations on your award-winning successes. Just wanted to know, in that moment when it's just you and the BAFTA, what's the conversation you're having in your head when you're just like the first time you're holding it by yourself in whatever room you were in?
God, well, do you know, I'd long, since I started writing, imagined, what it might be like to stand there and make an acceptance speech with a BAFTA, and I can't remember it at all, actually, when it happened, because I was so surprised. So it was only long afterwards that I sat, as you say, on my own and contemplated the fact that I'd actually got the thing. It was, yeah.
Did you say anything to yourself? Was there any words to like, wow, why?
No, I'm still quite bewildered by it, to be honest. So, yeah, it was exciting.
Nicôle, did you have a conversation with the BAFTA?
I haven't had one yet, but I think I might. I mean, my first thought, it's like Pete saying, like, you go up and you do your speech, and it is a bit of a whirlwind. And what I thought was how heavy it is, because I've never held one before, and they're so heavy, aren't they? They're really heavy. Like, it's like a proper thing. So it's just a kind of incredible feeling. I think you hope, and you sort of dream about kind of being recognised, and when you do it, it's just really lovely.
It's just speaking to that moment of like, wow, I've actually been recognised in this way, and such validation and stuff like that. But I want to take you back to the days when you had that light bulb moment that you guys were, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell stories for a living. Who were you then, and what were some of the motivations and the reasons that kind of sparked that interest in getting into writing? Either of you can go first.
Well, I didn't start until I was 30 years old, and it was I was an alcoholic and drug addict, and I got very, very sick at age 30 with it. And when I went to AA, they said you've got to do something to try and sort of fill the time, so you're not thinking about drink all the time. So I picked up a pen and literally with a hand I had to hold it steady with this hand because it was shaking so badly. Just started writing down just little scraps of sort of thoughts and ideas, and then became obsessed with it from that point on. And then sort of with the kind of drive of a recovering alcoholic, desperate not to think about drink, just thought about writing instead all the time. So that was it, really.
That was the trigger.
Yeah.
Did it, because that, as you said, that manic kind of craving, and was writing always there in your life at all, or was it just literally? And what was it how did you know you could write?
I didn't. It was just... Yeah, I'd always read a lot, but it had never been on the cards, at all. And I thank God that I picked up a pen instead of like a paintbrush, because I can't paint. It'd be a complete disaster. So luckily I turned out I could do it, and then over the years, obviously, sort of honed my craft and learned more and more and more. But no, I knew from early on that I had sort of a certain facility with it,
Okay, yeah, got it.
I sort of started. Acting first, I guess, as a kid, teenager, I was very into drama. But I was also very good at English, and I just think my drama teacher said to me, you can be an actor, but I was never sort of told I could really do anything with the writing. So I loved writing. I did it as like a passion and just for a bit of fun, actually. I just didn't kind of connect the dots that you could earn money and make a living. So I kind of was trying to be an actor, and at the time I was at this youth theatre called Theatre Royal Stratford East, and this kind of there was like a BBC production that kind of came, and they were creating a spin-off for BBC Three called E20. It was for the EastEnders kind of first like online drama, and I just applied for that. So that was my first like taste of I think I was 19 or 20 of like actually like writing a script. But it still took me quite a few years to kind of be brave enough to say, oh, I'm also a writer as well as an actor, and I'm just sort of writing for fun versus trying to get anything like produced or made.
No, fair enough, I understood that. Pete, it will be assumed that as a white man in this industry, the path has been cleared for you to tell any story you wanted. And Nicôle, as a mixed-race woman, it'll be assumed that you'd have to fight to have your voice heard in the industry. Can you both speak to the difficult and not so difficult parts of becoming a writer?
I have no experience other than my own. I certainly, there was no one saying, please come and do whatever. It was, such a sort of competitive industry, and I found it incredibly competitive, and sort of had to over the years kind of harass and harangue and you know, try and sort of find a way in. I you know, I don't know. Yeah, that's just my experience, you know.
So, I mean, I was talking about any kind of, what were the obstacles? Because it is an assumption that, you know, from when you're a white man, you're just going to be able to tell the stories you want to tell without any restriction. And not to put that, you know, you don't represent every white man going, but there is, like, what were some of the difficulties for you, if there were any?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's trying to get anyone to listen, you know, because I think there's, you know, so many people that want to tell stories and so many people that can, and so trying to get, you know, anyone to answer the phone, anyone to read anything is incredibly hard. And then, of course, you know, there's, you know, growing up, you know, just a working class kid that never, you know, it's in your head as well, of you know, what you think is your potential, what you see as your future, you know, the way the world looks to you. And it can look quite small, and it can feel quite restrictive, and so almost sort of being able to break out of that and think, well, why not? You know, like you know, the thing that separates a writer that I admire from me is that they've written tons of stuff. So I need to start writing tons and tons of stuff, you know, and you know, through that try and build the confidence to then take it to people and put it in front of them and say, I think this is worth reading, you know, and I think my story that I'm telling is worth hearing.
Well, I definitely do think it is more of a challenge. I think that you only have to look at people, how, you know, statistically, like how many black women or mixed race women have their own TV shows, or, you know, sort of at top level kind of, you know, execing TV shows and films and being heads of departments even. I think it really trickles down. I mean, I think, as Pete said, like, class really intersects. Like, I'm working class and mixed race from the East End, a woman. So I think you have all these kind of things that can sort of be seen as obstacles, depending on, I think, who is the gatekeeper. Like, there have been some people that have been really instrumental in being like, well, your voice is important, and the stories you have to tell are really important, even if you're not from a certain world or demographic. I think you have to get over your like imposter syndrome firstly, because even when I was sort of starting out writing and I was in writers' rooms, I was typically the only person of colour. So I think, and how you often get given a script or whatever, it's based on like how vocal you are in the room and if you put your hand up and how confident you kind of are. So I did a lot of faking it till I made it, you know, and I think I looked at people like Michaela Cole because I could identify more with her and her being from the East End, and Bola Agbaje, like I saw her play when I was, I think, 20, Gone Too Far, at the Royal Court, and then obviously then my play got to the Royal Court. So I think I needed to see the people, and it was hard to see the people because there aren't enough. So I try and be as visible, I guess, for that reason, so it can kind of inspire the next kind of wave.
Thank you. Pete, was there anyone that you were looking to, whose footsteps you were kind of possibly inspired by?
No, not particularly. I mean, you know, I'd always admired, you know, the work of, you know, Russell T Davies, and you know, and had been obsessed with you know, film growing up, and but no one in particular, really no.
That's a confidence. I think that's, and then you having the confidence to see beyond what society imposes on you as a restriction. And where did you draw from that? Like, though you saw the Michaela Coles and Bola Agbajes and stuff like that, but how did you find it within yourself to say, okay, those things, and I'm not going to let those things hold me back?
For me, like, a real motivation has been being broke. Genuinely, like, when you're broke, you are quite fearless, because I was like, I have nothing to lose. I'm living in a shitty house share. Like, I've got no cash. So I might as well. Like, I just felt like I had nothing kind of... Yeah, it honestly was that. I had nothing to lose. And I thought, well, my whole thing has always been, like, when I'm making decisions, I'm always like, well, I've been broke before, so if I have to be broke again, I know how to survive. And that's kind of been my armour, I guess, in a way. I don't want to go back to being broke, just FYI. But, you know, you have been and you've survived. So that being working class has given me a really good, like, bravado, I think.
I think
it's like a superpower almost, you know. Starting out, you know, after so many years of addiction, you know, I had absolutely nothing, had made the most hideous mess of everything. And so I thought, well, what can go wrong? You know,
There's
nothing to take from me.
There's
So
no bottom more than bottom. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
But then hop, skip and a jump. Pete, you had the successful radio series Love in Recovery. Nicole, you were acting in prominent projects such as Sense8, Death in Paradise, Bloods. And so when and where and how did the seeds of Somewhere Boy and Mood start to blossom for you guys?
So I think for the sort of early part of my career, I'd trying to sort of feel my way through it, had almost been kind of trying to emulate things that I saw, had thought perhaps there's a right way to do it, and I need to try and, sort of write things that fit that kind of that style, and then eventually just thought I'm not enjoying it. It doesn't speak to me. I'm not really kind of exploring things that matter to me, and eventually just thought, I'll have one more roll of the dice and just do what I want to do, and that's when sort of everything started to change. I started writing stuff that mattered to me, which then obviously mattered to an audience and mattered to the commissioners that were reading it, and so on. And then it was. So I wrote Love in Recovery, which was just an exploration really of my own drinking and and what compelled me to drink and all of that. And then with Somewhere Boy, I'd gone into Clarkmore, the production company, with an idea that they hated, and then walked away gutted. And then on the way home, an idea popped into my head. I was trying to think of how I could explore the themes that are important to me. Sort of fathers and sons and relationships and regret and everything else, and thought, actually, this little sort of high concept idea could sort of maybe hold all of those themes. And then quickly ran home and wrote it down and pitched it to them like a minute later, and they went for it. So
that's cool. Thank you, Nicole.
What was it? It was what was
the seeds? Where did you start to get the kind of I want to do Mood?
Well, I think I was acting. I was like a jobbing actress, and then I was kind of writing spec scripts at the time, and in a similar way to Pete, I had written 2 plays that I think was like, I'd been at these sort of playwriting groups, and I think I was trying to follow like how to write a play, and this is what came out. And so it was only then I was like, I'm actually just going to write something for myself, and I wrote Super Ho, and that was like not commissioned. It was, nobody was expecting to read it, kind of thing, and that was kind of what gave me my break, and it was so in my voice and my humour and very just, I guess, authentic, as opposed to some of the other things that really spiraled, and I had never thought to write it for television, actually. I started meeting production companies based off of, going in rooms or whatever, and quite a lot of companies were like, maybe you should adapt Super Ho for television. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And then I did, and that's kind of how it all came about.
Thank you. So Pete, as a parent, you mentioned being a parent. In telling this story, Somewhere Boy, did you have real-world fears of wanting to protect your children from this really slightly insane world?
Yeah, I mean, I think those sort of the fears of a parent letting your child out into the world are kind of timeless. I think potentially now is the world seems more complicated than ever, and so I think those fears are great. So, and I think as parents, we're kind of, our children are going through things that we can't prepare them for because we don't understand them. We don't understand that kids could be bullied through a phone when they go upstairs, and all of these things are so new. And so I think more and more we feel potentially a desire to hold them a little bit closer. And so essentially we're just sort of thinking, what would happen if you took that to an insane degree, sparked by, obviously, him sort of mired in grief makes one decision out of love, and then has to do sort of increasingly kind of bad things to protect that one good thing. And at what point the sort of scales tip, and the good outweighs, the bad outweighs the good then.
Just for anyone who, you're really naughty if you haven't, for anyone who hasn't seen Somewhere Boy, could you give us a brief synopsis of what it's about?
Yeah, so it's about boy Danny, and when he is a baby, his mum is killed in an accident, and his dad has a breakdown and sort of fearful of the world, the wider world now in his grief, buys a tiny little house in the middle of nowhere and locks his son up inside and creates this beautiful world inside the house for him and his boy, and tells the boy when he's old enough to start asking questions about why they don't go outside, that the world outside is full of monsters that will eat him up if he goes outside, just like they took his mum. And so the boy believes it entirely until he's 18 years old and his dad dies, and he's suddenly dragged out of the house into the real world and has to live as a normal as a normal boy with his otherwise apparently normal cousin.
Yeah. Very good series, guys. Watch it if you haven't. Nicole, can you give us a brief synopsis of what Mood's about?
So Mood tells the story of Sasha, and she is sort of in a crisis when you meet her, and she is a wannabe singer, rapper, kind of creative, and she falls out with her family kind of very early on in the series, and she ends up living with this influencer come party girl who leads her into this kind of world of influencing and sex work, and she's discovering who she is kind of across the series, and it's told in part with the songs that she conceives in her head.
So what I really loved about Mood is, though we've seen stories about the predatory nature of the industry, I don't think I've seen anything that touches on it in the way that Mood does, and especially, as you said, the influencer life of girls getting caught up in situations where they can be exploited for sex work and having their rights taken away from them when they seemingly think they're in control of their destiny and their future. Why was that important for you to bring that to the forefront?
Well, it was sort of at the time that, I don't know, I feel like Instagram just was like buzzing as hell that year. I don't know, it was like 2017, 18 or something. And the Explore page was just a thing, and I just kept seeing all these young women, and they just all really looked the same, and there was this like homogenized look, and I just was just looking at all of these kind of faces, and there was it was at the same time that I had seen this website called Tag Your Sponsor, and they were, the main aim of this very chauvinistic, menist type website was to expose women who were secretly like sex workers, but really they were influencers. And there was somebody that I recognized on this website from the Explore page, and at first I was going to write about the men, actually. I was just like, what kind of creeps make this website? But instead I went down this just really deep dive of like who these women were on the surface, and how they had all these bags and these holidays and just like had the most amazing lives, but actually, you know, were working as sex workers. And I reached out to some women on Snapchat originally, and I just felt like I hadn't seen sex work explored in a kind of nuanced way of how you might not exactly choose to do it, but you might fall into it, and then once you're in it, you're kind of like, how did I get here? Rather than it being this, you know, sort of either really confident kind of I just love sex decision, or like I'm sort of definitely being abused. I felt like there was a real grey area that I was wanting to explore.
And you did it very well. Again, if you haven't watched Mood, please watch Mood. But you also went the extra step, Nicole, not only being the writer and creator. You play the lead, Sasha. So which influenced what? I don't even know if that's a real sentence. Who influenced what? Did you build the world around Sasha, or was Sasha a byproduct of the story you wanted to tell?
Ooh, I think Sasha was a byproduct, actually, of because there were so many women I met and so many stories that I did kind of bring it a little bit back to what I know, which is, you know, it was a mixed race girl in East London who didn't have much, which, you know, conveniently was where I was in my life. So I kind of brought it back there to like what I knew, and then I kind of they were kind of not neck and neck, but there were these competing stories that found a way to interweave. And at first, when I even did the play, I wasn't even going to play Sasha because I wanted to direct it. And again, this is my constant theme. It came down to money, and I didn't want to have to pay anyone, so I then did be Sasha. You know, I was Sasha in the reading, and then it. Yeah.
Thank you. And Pete, so with Somewhere Boy being about the relationship between a father, Aaron, and son, Danny, though in a situation that could be labelled toxic and abusive, there is love at the heart of it. How did you navigate showing this central relationship honestly without preaching, apologising, or sensationalising?
I think it's that it. Sorry, I think it's that it comes from a place of love, you know, and I think. You know, our sort of intention from the outset was to, you know, in a show kind of ostensibly about monsters, we wanted to kind of like posit the question, what if there aren't any? Do you know what I mean? I feel like sort of, you know, in a kind of ever polarised world where it sort of seems sort of pleasing and simple to look at the world in kind of sort of relatively binary terms, like, you know, we're right and they're wrong and we're good and they're everything else. I sort of wanted to think, well, what if the world is really just full of people, human beings trying and for the most part, like all of us, failing, you know, and I think... So for everyone in it, both, you know, his dad, Steve, who you know, who does this extraordinary thing it comes from a place of love, and it spirals out of control, almost. He doesn't want it to end the way he does, and finally, when it does end, it's he ends it and sort of sets his son free, and then when he's out in the real world, there's his auntie and his cousin, and they all do mad things, and make terrible mistakes, and even then when he finds the monster, the man that killed his mum, it's a boy sort of finally confronting this monster, and it's just a human conversation between two sort of broken down men, one of whom, caused a terrible accident many years ago and feels dreadful about it, So I think that, I think, looking at all the relationships and just trying to find sort of the real kind of humanity at the heart of them.
And the honesty behind it.
Exactly that, which I think is at the root of sort of most relationships, most people, a desire to do good, which is we happen to fuck it up most of the time,
I hear that. Nicole, you added the extra layer of music and song and choreographed pieces. How did you work the songs into the narrative, and how did you work with your BAFTA award-winning musical crew, Brian Senti and Kwame Kweyama, to merge the worlds of drama, narrative, comedy, and everything?
Well, when I was writing the scripts, I'd always have a sort of sense or an idea of where I wanted to kind of have the music in it, so I wrote these like placeholder songs, I would call them, and I would write the lyrics, and I would go, okay, I need the story to move here now. But as is the nature of TV, you do get a lot of notes. So I kind of wouldn't start making songs till I felt like the script was in a really good place, and the BBC had given notes and production company, and then, okay, when we kind of got close to like locking an episode, that's when I could go into the studio and make these songs. And I would meet Kwame, KZ, and I would either send him voice notes, or I'd say, look, I really want to create this kind of Cardi B type song, because I think this is what she's feeling at this moment, or this kind of ska, cockney musical things in my head. And we would get into the studio, or he would send me beats, and I'd write the lyrics, and then we'd kind of come up with this song. And Brian came on as the composer, and traditionally I guess the composer's kind of there when it's all done, and they just kind of, not just, but add music. But we wanted him to use the stems from some of the songs and make it feel a bit more cohesive. So I would go into the studio with the composer, and I would kind of sing strange sounds, and he would like turn it into score. And so then it felt like the score was also a part of Sasha's kind of world. I had such a great time on the music with those guys. Are
we going to be seeing you on, I'm going to say Top of the Pops, don't listen to me. Young people, ignore me.
I know what it is. I think it's still on.
I just, whatever, I'm old. Is this speaking to your sense,
I mean, I do, I'm a real musical theatre head. Like, okay. I do love musicals. I think I definitely want to do other musical projects for sure, whether that's on stage or screen or film. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do something.
Mood the musical, West End.
But who knows? Okay. Who knows?
Okay. Pete, so who did you lean on to shape the world of Somewhere Boy? I put Somewhere Boy. And did any of your radio drama skills feed into this? Where did you kind of like your experiences before with Love and Recovery?
Certainly, just in kind of writing from the heart and not worrying too much about how it ought to be. Do you know what I mean? I've never studied it or read a book, so I don't know the rules of screenwriting really, which I think is sometimes a benefit, because there's a lot of scripts that follow a very particular pattern, so why write another one, I think, and so certainly learning that from Love and Recovery and just sort of going for it, and also allowing the story to lead us where it needed to lead us, rather than feeling like, we're at this episode, so therefore this has to happen, and then just working with a brilliant team, of Clark and Well Films, who it was such a sort of collaborative effort. At no point was I kind of thrown to the walls or left entirely on my own, and it was the lot of us kind of really breaking story, working out really what the show was really about, and then me sitting in a room on my own, tearing my hair out, writing the thing,
That's cool. And both shows have such distinctive looks and feels and tones. East London, because you're an East Londoner, but can you speak to filming in East London and the locations that you chose? How important were they to that, like, cemented the whole world and story? And then Pete, you filmed in Wales, so why was that your location of choice?
Well, I think, we shot in lockdown, so I think we would have maybe ideally shot even more of some of the stuff in East London, but it was bloody hard to get locations during lockdown. But I think it was important for like even for just me as a viewer, sometimes I'm watching stuff and I'm like, that's not East London or that's not South London. Where's that? So I kind of wanted it to feel like as real as it could for Sasha. But I think the beautiful thing about Mood is that she does then go on this quite big journey, and you know she ends up abroad. I don't want to ruin it if anyone hasn't seen it, but you know in episode 5 she's abroad and she's away and she's in the sun, and I think that's something that had to start in East London because that's the thing, her world is like opening up across the series and she's moving to all these new spaces that she doesn't feel quite comfortable in actually, and I think that's kind of how the world is, you know, you start in this one place and then you know your eyes kind of open up. So.
We shot in Wales just because the countryside is so beautiful. We wanted the house that he lives in, you know, just to be surrounded, although he's never seen it, with the most, you know, beautiful countryside. This idea that he spent his whole life living in the house and just outside was all this wonder. And then, you know, it was never sort of set in any specific location. We wanted it to be a town that felt real, and we wanted the people to feel as though they belonged in that town, but it didn't really matter where exactly that town was. I mean, in the end, because we cast Sam Bottomley first, he was such an extraordinary actor, we then kind of cast it around him and set it then in the sort of fictional northern town because we didn't want him to lose his accent. That was it, really.
Thank you. So, like, for both of you, having created and written these shows, how difficult was it to let go and trust your story babies in the hands of the directors and the actors?
I love that story babies.
Story babies.
Story babies. Yeah, it is hard. I won't lie. It is definitely hard to. I think I slightly had a cheat sheet because I was in it, so I was there every day, so I could kind of see everything that was going on. So it's going to be interesting when I have an experience where I'm not actually on set every day as the writer. But you are protective, and you do care that the story you're telling is you know, is sort of appears on screen as you want it depicted. But I had, you know, directors who really did understand my vision and what I wanted from the show. And also you have to trust your producers that are also there working with the directors, you know, to kind of make sure everything does feel as cohesive as possible and as true to the script and the story you're telling.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me there's a sort of constant kind of process of recalibration, you know, that it looks away in my head as I'm writing it, and then, you know, when the director sort of presents his vision, it's not the same, but because, you know, he's a better director than I am, you know, the hope is that it's better, and then when the actors come on board and they start delivering the lines, there's a moment where you think, shit, that's not how I've heard it in my head, but because they're much better actors than I am, you know, often it's much better, and then when you know, there's certain beats that aren't being hit, you know, like you're there to point out and to point out why, you know, we need to stress this particular bit, but I mean, yeah, for me, you know, it was a dream scenario in that every stage of the process and everyone that came on board kind of elevated it and made better. And so by the end, we ended up with far better than I could have imagined, you know.
Were you on set every day, all the time?
Well, I mean, because we shot in 2 blocks, 4 episodes in one block and then a second block. And during the first block, I was writing the second block, which was the most hideous amount of pressure. And then I was on set sort of intermittently, and then on the second block on set the whole time. And just occasionally sidling up and offering a maybe, you know, but there's a delicate balance as well, you know, because, you know, you're working with people because they're so extraordinary at their jobs, and the last thing I want to be is like a backseat director, you know, because they're doing a better job than I can. So it's just, you know, just as a writer being on there, just to hear it, because sometimes in the hearing of it over and over, you suddenly hit on a more kind of elegant way to do a scene or a word that would just be better, and so it's nice for that.
So just for the, you know, to get that confidence to say, excuse me, could you just do that all again? Was there a moment when you really were like adamant, this needs to be this because this is what makes sense to me?
Yes, lots of moments. But I think as long as it's coming from a kind of just like a genuine place. I don't think anyone's ever trying to be obstructive. It's like sometimes things just have to be that way because they make sense to the story or the narrative, and you've conceived something in such a specific way that I know for myself anyway, I care about the detail of things, or like, okay, but this is how the actors speak, this is their accent, they're from East London, or like, if you're from here, this is how you dress, or like, this is how an influencer dresses, so like, unfortunately, like, that's not quite it. So, but I just think it's part of the process, like when and as long as you're working with truly collaborative people. I think you're all striving for the same thing. So often you're pushing each other to get like the best work, essentially.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, also like there's the writing. As a writer, you understand that there's certain. It's almost hard to explain why a certain thing needs to be a certain way. It's to do with the rhythm of a scene, which then sort of feeds into almost like the rhythm of an episode. And sometimes you don't know how to explain. You just know that that's right. And so being able to have that conversation on set and just say, I know it sounds crazy, but unless we get this bit here, it's going to affect things, and no one knows why, including me, but I'm certain of it,
It's also because I think you hold the whole story in your head.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, I think if you're on set and you're doing a day, and there's so much stress of the day, people can fixate on the day, whereas you kind of can have the outside perspective to be like, this thing affects, like, episode 5 or something, and you just know it so well that you do have to kind of fight for your story babies.
Can you speak to a moment throughout the whole process of where it was like, I quit, I'm done, I hate it all, but then you kind of had to be brought back, and like, how did you bring yourself back to the, okay, guys, calm down, behave, let's get this done?
It was writing the second block while filming the first, because when you've got the part, you can take as long as you want to write a pilot, because no one cares, no one's waiting for it, and then even for the second few, you're in development and there's time, and then that time just gets shorter and shorter, and sure enough, when you're filming the first block and a lot of money's been spent, everyone's on set, and now you've got like a week to write an episode, and it has to be as strong, if not stronger, than the ones that you took a year over, and it's. And so the pressure's insane, and the pressure never got to me, like, never affected the work, but I did go entirely mad, I was like, you need to go and just stay with your mum for a few days because you're impossible to live with,
I just send it to mum.
I got weirdly paranoid. I thought people were trying to get to me. My wife was like, you're mad. I'm like, they've got to you on. It was like that. So I went.
I love that the wife said, can you go to your mum? Go back to your mum. Deal with your son, woman.
I think it is unbearable to live with writers. I honestly think
wouldn't wish
it
on
is.
anyone.
I couldn't. I could not. I'm trying to think of like a specific moment, because there were a lot of really challenging moments. I think the difference is, I don't know. It's like I never felt like I could quit.
Yeah,
like it was.
sure.
It was just like, it's almost like be careful of the thing you wished for, but the thing is you have really wished for it. So I was just like, I'll be damned if these people break me. Like I just really was like, I'm gonna like prove them all. I think I kind of went into a maniacal, like I've just gotta, get it done and just kind of survive, because I do often think it is like bigger than you, of like trying to and I think what can be really hard being mixed race or a black woman is you're so concerned of being like the angry black woman like all the time, and you're like, well actually, like I am the boss, I am in this position for a reason. And that was what I found the most challenging, sometimes being challenged by people that I was like, if I wasn't me, you wouldn't challenge me actually. So those were the things I feel like I had to really like, that really got to me, but because they were so specific, I was just like, nah, you ain't gonna get me, nah.
Yeah. I just want to say, which scene, episode really captures, yes, this is what I mean, this is why?
There's a scene in a later episode where we tell episode 8, we tell all in flashback. We sort of detail the kind of day leading up to it all exploding in the house and him finally being dragged out, and just a moment between them, when they both kind of know that it's over, and there's such an understanding and there's so much love between the father and son, and yet he's been betrayed so much. So, and it just encapsulated, I think, the sort of complexities of the whole relationship, which, in turn the whole show was based on. And to see that and think, my God, I think we've kind of nailed it, because even though these two men are kind of sitting in almost silence, the scene is so full and rich, and the performances, in the rushes that we saw, which is so extraordinary, that I just thought, I think actually we might be onto something here. I think we've really sort of got it, Thank God.
I think, because there's so many musical moments, I feel like, I do really love the scene in the job centre.
Yeah, that.
Because, it's just such a shit place to be, and I really was like, oh, I just want to create this kind of euphoric, everyone's together. It's like we shot it actually on the road that I was living on when I was writing the play, and I think it just encapsulated it of like how seamlessly it kind of it moves from like the narrative and sort of Sasha, you know, not being given any help, and you know, which is very true to life, and then moving into this kind of song with everybody together. Yeah, it was one of the best days to shoot, and just, yeah, I think you can feel it on screen.
For those of you who've ever been in a job centre, I live for the time when I could have broke out into song and sworn at the guy or the girl behind the counter. Give me my money. Who's got a question? Ooh, lads. Do I pick or do you pick? Oh, because I love your waistcoat.
Hey.
Can you hear me anyway? I don't know if it's working.
Good job.
So I've got two-part question. Firstly, I'm Ashley. I'm a producer. Really love both of you.
Hello.
You guys work.
Thanks very much.
We powered up a bit to you afterwards. I don't know if that's an option, but
Let me know.
my questions come from a real producer kind of brain. What kind of budgets are you guys working with, and what was the structure? You had obviously BBC for you, Nicole, was your commissioner. You had a production company. Was it your production company? Was it a partner? And for you, Pete, the same question. What was the kind of structure and kind of budget around this project?
I'm kind of not like privy to all of the budgetary, not because I can't be, just because actually I kind of didn't want to know, because I kept asking for stuff and I was kind of like, find the money. So kind of just want to create in peace. But it wasn't on this project, it wasn't my production company. I worked with quite a small production outfit actually, in terms of like you know, quite boutique, called Bonafide, and they optioned the project really early on actually, and then I went on to actually then have a theatrical run of it, and then went back to writing the script. And during that time the BBC had commissioned a pilot. Typically, I think this is typical anyway, that if with a drama script, you don't shoot a pilot. You either get greenlit or you don't. Whereas often with comedy scripts, they might commission you to make the pilot, just in case people don't know that. But so yeah, if you get greenlit with a drama script, that's it. You're getting your episodes and you are making the show. So that was kind of my process. And then just before we went into production, we went out to US outfits, and we AMC took it on, and BBC America to show Mood in the States and around the rest of the world.
Yeah, for us it was Channel 4, so it was the production company was Clark & One. We took it to Channel 4, who greenlit it, but it was going to be a co-production with them, with BBC Studios, because currently, you know, a lot of broadcasting, you know, everything has to be a co-production, because the budgets have sort of, you know, just gone quite high, I guess. And then BBC Studios then sold it around the world after the fact, to recoup their investment.
Yes. Somebody down here, and then come.
Nicole, Pete, thank you so much. Pete, your story is an inspiration. I mean, I'm glad that you've found a way alternate to what you've been going through. My question is to both of you about the construction of dialogue. When you're drafting your first drafts, I mean, do you have an instinct for dialogue? Do you find that, you know, some things you have to tweak a bit, or does it come more natural than other times?
Yeah, for me, I always find that the less thought given to it on the day of writing, the better. You know, I think that the majority of time before sitting down and writing is spent making sure I truly understand the characters. And then, you know, I'll try and write an episode in a couple of days and try and sort of inhabit the character to the point that, you know, just sort of whatever comes out, kind of raw and mad as it is over this hideous 2 days, feels sort of natural. And you know, and then going back through the editing process, I find often that it's that stuff that never changes because it feels raw and authentic and real. Yeah, and I think doing it that way as well, you don't you don't worry so much about exposition and everything, you know, because if you inhabit the scene, then whatever, you know, then the truth behind the scene is so, you know, such a sort of, what I'm trying to say, is in the fabric of it all, you know. So no one really has to say what's on their mind. No one has to say what they're thinking, because it's all just there in the looks and the moments and what's not said. Yeah. Is that a terrible answer to the question? Sorry.
No, it's
really
perfect. It's
rambling
perfect.
answer.
Because as a writer myself, I mean, I was just curious to know, because I empathise where it is, and sometimes I've written stuff down, and I'm thinking, you know, is that right? What do I do and stuff? So yeah, but it's a good answer. Yeah.
But I think like human beings, you know, I always think, you know, I've co-written with people who sort of, you know, sit and their work in the end is, you know, so fantastic, but it's such a different process, you know, and so methodically think about, you know, the logic of every line. And to me, there's something slightly inhuman about it, because as human beings, we're not often logical. You know, the way we express things sometimes makes sort of no sense. It's free association, you know, as I'm proving right now by making no sense whatsoever. And so I think, yeah, just sort of trusting your instincts, I find, you know, and just kind of going for it and letting it all kind of pour out onto the page seems to work for me.
Nicôle?
Obviously I'm an actor as well, so I do. I speak aloud a lot. I speak my dialogue aloud a lot and play all of the characters in my office at home. Like I'm really, and I probably do actually, maybe dissimilar to you, but I do revise dialogue quite a lot in a kind of, I think that maybe does come from the more like improvisational kind of way you have about you as an actor, like when you're sort of like workshopping something. So I kind of get everything out. And then I might, you know, I'll read, I always, you know, I do so many drafts and I'll just be like, this is not working. Or when I'm looking across like a whole series, I'll be like, I kind of need this character to start here. And maybe they're thinking this at this point. So I do often go and kind of do a polish over the whole thing just to make sure that character is consistent the way through. Because sometimes I think you can watch something on telly and you'll be like, the character started off as this and now they're saying this. And also I find that kind of in what you said about how you can overthink dialogue, that actually, like I say all the same things all the time. And I've noticed like in scripts, like say that people have sent me, where people are always saying such strikingly like different things, but actually most people talk in the same rhythm and the same pattern, and you don't really need to overthink it and think, oh, but they said this on it's like, when you are just who you are, you kind of talk the same for the majority. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hello to you both. My name is Sierra Callahan, and I'm an actress, writer, and producer. And before I ask my question, I just wanted to say to you, Pete, that I'm somebody with a lot of issues with addiction in my family, and I've lost several family members, unfortunately. So I just wanted to give you a big congratulations on your sobriety, and perhaps a round of applause, because that's a big accomplishment.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It might not mean anything coming from me, but I'm really proud of you.
Great. Thank you.
And then for you both, I have the same question, but in different flavors. So obviously there are a lot of stereotypes and tropes and things like that about addiction and sex work and sexuality and race. And I have never been either mixed race or a sex worker, but I have dealt with addiction. So I was just wondering if either your own work or in somebody else's work, a piece of media or film or television or a novel even, that you think captures that experience really well so that people have something to look to that's a bit more nuanced and educational.
Good question.
It's a really good question. I'm trying to think now.
Question.
Yeah.
I know I'm so shit with my memory is really poor. Because I did do a lot of reading. I read, particularly for sex, like I'm trying to remember the book that I read. It's like a modern day guide. I can picture the cover and I cannot think of the title at all. But it is from a charity. Do you know? I'm going to Google it after, and I'm going to tell you what it is because it's going to drive me insane.
Sounds
but that is where I got a lot of the more statistical information and about the subject that I was trying to tell, rather than just the kind of personal first-hand accounts. Because that is what I did on the whole. Actually, it was that I just spoke to as many sex workers as I could. But there is a really good book that adds the kind of context. So.
I will find you later.
I will give it to you.
My God, I'm sort of struggling to think as well. I think that, I mean, I think there's as many stories of addiction as there are addicts. Everything's obviously so kind of specific and particular to that person, and I think that the sort of root cause of it is so strange. I mean, I spent many years thinking about it and writing about it. I still feel like I'm still circling it, as to the sort of reasons why I myself, became such an addict and why it's always, a huge part of my life. And I think, there's been extraordinary representation of it. Like, my name is Joe and Nil by Mouth and So yeah, and there's a book, and again, I can picture the cover driving me up the wall because it's so good. But and yeah, perhaps I'll Google it as well afterwards and tell
I'll
you.
find you later as well.
Okay, grand.
We get someone from the back at the top somewhere. There's a lady on the left, and then the guy on the right.
Hi. Oh
Hello.
my god, it's so loud. My name is Tiana and I'm a writer from London as well. My question is about momentum. So I wrote a script like 2 or 3 years ago called Obia that was on the Brit list. And from there I've had like quite a bit of momentum, but development is very long and you run out of energy all the time. And I was just basically wondering if you guys have any advice about momentum and maintaining your momentum throughout the development process.
There was a great quote in, I think it's the book The Sun Also Rises, where someone is talking about going broke, and he says it happens very slowly and then all at once. And I feel like the thing that has always kept me going, is the idea that it can go so slow and be glacial and a nightmare, and then all of a sudden it changes, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, I wish it'd slow down. And because that, if you keep going, is always a potential. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be at this speed forever. Suddenly there'll come a point where it all changes, and knowing that your life has, because of an idea that you have in your head, has the potential to change entirely is the thing that always kept me going.
You're definitely right. Like Nicole was saying, I was in the job centre like 3 weeks before I found out I was on the Brit list, and my life changed like that overnight. So that's really helpful.
Without being too personal, like, is it when you're saying like momentum, is it that like you're having like long periods of like waiting for decision, or like you're sort of like in the notes process and is it that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's all of that. So from the beginning, it's like after the list itself, there's loads of meetings and stuff like that, and it's like, oh my god, I wish it had slowed down. I wish this wasn't happening like this anymore. And then after that, it's just like radio silence, it goes dead, and then you're just working on the thing, or like pitching in between pitches. Like, how do you keep when you're pitching to broadcasters or streamers?
Yeah, no, I actually get you. Yeah, it's like because sometimes it's sort of like everybody wants you, and then it's suddenly it's the next thing, isn't it? And sometimes I because I try and really not take that too personally in terms of like you have moments. Like right now, I guess me and Pete are having like a moment. You kind of get a moment for a bit, and then it might go quiet, and you have another project, and you get another moment. But for me, I think how I deal with that is like just trying to always be on my and kind of control what I can control, like have your script in the best possible place. Like when you get your notes, hand in your script back and like deliver it as quick as you can, because it's like essentially you're not the problem then. Like actually you're waiting on everybody else. And I think people often love to like try and pass the buck a bit. Like, well, actually we could have done that if you handed in your script on this and like. So as long as you're kind of on what you need to be on, like it will happen. It's just you've kind of got to it's just the nature of the beast, and try not to take it personal as much as you can. And if a project is quiet for a while, maybe pick something else up, and it's like you kind of need a few spinning plates at any point, because you never know like what's going to be the one to go.
Oh yeah, I think I think the great thing about being a writer is that it's all you, and you have the ability to then generate something new while you wait for that. I can only imagine being an actor and sort of waiting for the call. Where you're entirely sort of powerless. This is a writer. It's within you to then start something else. And someone described it to me as making sure you have like an armada, because a lot of them are gonna sink. And making sure you have enough that one or two or three will go through.
The gentleman up there.
Hello. Firstly, my name's Ash, and I just want to say congratulations to the both of you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask to both of you, but especially to Nicole, as an actor myself, I feel like there's some things, especially starting off at the working class, you pick up some work ethics, and I wanted to ask how you guys feel like maybe those principles helped you along the way, being involved with other people. And I know that in the industry, it's quite important to not only offer something to the table, but be someone that everyone can work with. So I just wanted to ask, how do you feel like that might have helped you along the way?
Sort of like being working class and kind of just trying to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, so if you feel like maybe being starting off as working class, if that helped you with gaining those kind of principles.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that you you have that kind of hustle culture when you're working class, and it makes you really scrappy, I guess. And I think that it helps you because you're just a hard worker. And I think that talent, what's the really famous quote? Like, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I always think about that because I know so many talented people that ain't doing shit, and to be honest, it's because they're not, that, you know, there's going to be a myriad of reasons why, you know, whether there's a lack of self-belief or there's, you know, whatever, but at the same time, some people just don't want it enough, and your talent, especially as an actor, I will say, because you said you act, right? Like, you are just by the phone waiting, you know, and it's not in your control, but if you can do as much as you can within your control, I think then kind of the sky is the limit. I'm sort of going on a ramble, but I don't know if that's
No, yeah,
that's useful at all to you.
That is.
Yeah, no, I sort of agree, really. You know, I think that, you know, because, you know, no one sort of, I don't know, because you've worked hard to get in and get here, and so you'll continue to do exactly that. You know, you're sort of here on merit, and so yeah, so I think you're right. It's that sort of hustle culture of just going for it, and also being kind of fearless, because what are you going to do? You know, make me skint again. Like, been there for a long time, you know.
And on that note, I think we've got to wrap it up. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Nicôle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.